Uh, just getting kicked in the balls, figuratively speaking.
Yeah. Woo. Ooh. Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast. The Third Degree Net Podcast. Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast. Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast.
Third Degree, the podcast, is brought to you by Soccer90.com. They are your source for FC Dallas, U.S. national team, and international club gear. They got all the latest stuff from the U.S. men's national team, the home and away jerseys, the pre-match tops, and the jackets. And as a Third Degree listener, you get 20% off the code in-store and online. Code Third Degree, Soccer90.com, in-store, online, 20% off. Some exclusions may apply. Third Degree, the podcast, is also brought to you by the Lindstrom Law Firm for wills, trust, probate, and business law. Call 469-515-2559. That's 469-515-2559. Or visit lindstromlawfirm.com for a free consultation.
Well, hello there, FC Dallas Curious fan. Welcome to episode 257 of Third Degree, the podcast. Yep, this one's going to hurt, but we'll get through it together. Hi, it's me, Peter. And together, and by together, I mean first, the good Dan Crooke. Howdy, Dan.
Hello. Hello.
How are you these days?
Getting by, just enjoying two terribly injured, ineffective teams,
Tell me all about it. And of course, your hero, my hero, everybody's hero, editor, founder of thirddegree.net, and the original soccer influencer himself, the amazing Buzz Carrick. Come in, Buzz.
Hi, fellas. How are y'all doing on this lovely Wednesday as we're recording evening?
I am reporting for duty, sir, because this podcast has a responsibility to the curious.
It does, yeah.
You just wanted to say duty.
I did. Duty. And our duty, I think, is to be honest and forthright and keep everybody grounded in the good times and in the bad.
All the things that make people mad.
And I want to start off this podcast by establishing some level set of agreement, which is, as bad as this season has started, and as bad as I think over the course of the next 45 minutes to an hour, we all are going to come to an agreement, it may continue to get, if not worse. This is not the norm. 2010 wasn't the norm. 2016 wasn't the norm at the other end. Nor is this. We will all get through this one way or another together as fans of this club, and we will return to the norm of middle of the table, make the playoffs, and feel good about ourselves, and think there's always next year.
Yeah, right now, FC Dallas is definitely not better than you think.
No.
No. Sure. I got a question for you, Peter.
Yes.
When did you become the optimistic one?
I'm not trying to be optimistic. I'm trying to be pragmatic about the situation.
Yeah.
Because I think it would be really easy to get on this podcast for people who a lot of people are new to this team within the last few years and have enjoyed a relatively good run for the most part over the last few years, especially those who have joined since, the high of 16 and what happened then. And things have been somewhat unstable, but this team has historically been better than average, which is what we all know is what this team is better than average over the course of its almost 30-year history. So when we get into this real shit, I don't want everybody to fall off the wagon just because of this, because I believe that we'll get back to the middle ground eventually in due time.
Yeah, I think that's fair. We always try and say, or I always try and say when I do the post game three things, or when I'm doing the analysis of the game, Dan does the same thing. It's important to take the emotion out of it. We're here to analyze and try and talk about how we got to where we are, or what's gone wrong, or what's gone good, and what's going well. So we're going to continue to try and do that, I think. So we're not going to have an overly emotional reaction.
But Dan, I appreciate you noticing.
Anytime.
That I'm trying.
Yeah.
So, Buzz, here we are on the heels of losing to Broccoli 2-1, a team that had not won an MLS soccer game since the summer of 2023.
Well, they'd won one. They hadn't won two, but yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And somehow all of this runs us down a road of just a miserable appearance, a miserable result. The fans went down there and gave it their best. And I think we've seen players get on social media and beg for forgiveness and apologize and all of that stuff. And I don't know how much you want to talk about the game in particular, or do you want to get to the whole? You want to talk about the game first?
Just a tiny bit.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. I think, Dallas got dominated in almost every category. But,
by a really shitty team,
by a really bad team. So, what you saw is what you always see from Nico Estevez, whether intentional or whether it just happens because of the team he has. When they go on the road, they try and stifle the game. They play a mid to low block. They try and close things down, try and keep it tight, try and give themselves a chance, right? And there was some trumpeting of the fact they didn't give up a goal in the first half. That was an improvement and all that kind of stuff. The problem is that we're now seeing a return to 2021, if you remember 2021, when Dallas was very susceptible to balls into the box from crosses, from wide spaces. And that has come back. And the bottom line is when you look at those goals, and it's not just this game, it's the game before that. There was a couple, and there was, and I'm sure Dan will tell us in a second, it probably was all season. It's very simple factors. It's like you're not closing down crosses, like the one that came off of the throw-in. There was only one defender over there instead of more. And then the bottom line is you're not winning aerial duels. And the people were close enough to their guy. They had bodies on guys. They had framed up guys, and then they just lost out on getting the ball. So when you're trying to play a mid to low block and you're giving up goals, Peter, we talk about here all the time, right? How do you break down a block? Well, one of the ways is you fire balls into guys on crosses, into try and get some headers. And that's what people are doing to Dallas, and they're susceptible to it. So everything else goes out the window if that tactic falls apart. Now, there's a discussion to be had of whether Austin being as bad as they have been, you shouldn't have tried to go there and play. But they know that's not what Dallas does on the road. So, overall, this season in the micro, it's the susceptibility to these crosses that's really killing them.
It was a bad game all the way around, and there's lots of, even Steve Davis, the good Steve Davis in his Substack wrote today. I mean, if you're at the point where you're lamenting the loss of Martinez as a center back, things have gone pretty wrong. Steve makes a very valid point.
Peter, who was it that was talking about this winter about getting a center back? I can't remember.
We all were.
Yeah,
yes.
Everybody.
Yes.
All of us.
Anybody paying attention.
Yeah.
Yes. And that's why when, Dan screamed like a little girl when he found out they were going to a 3-man back line because, what? You don't remember that day, do you, Dan?
I did no such thing.
Dan, do you have any thoughts on the Austin loss that you want to throw on the fire here?
God, it was terrible, wasn't it? Two terrible teams making a terrible game. The goal was incredibly frustrating, and including the one that was then pulled back for offside. There was just nothing good about that game.
No.
It's a little bit frustrating towards the end to watch your $9.7 million record signings just kind of strolling about looking like he's, I don't know, caught in the Somme Valley dodging German rounds and wondering where the hell his friend's gone. And, well, there's his head. Just a mess.
I do want to throw in a little bit of love for Musa, actually. He had 35 touches, which is not really crazy low for a 9, but it's not probably what you want out of him. But he did have 6 shot-creating actions, which is by far and away the best on the team. And he got the assist on that goal, which, by the way, shout out Eugene Ansah for being the first off-striker to play off of a high 9 correctly this season. And Musa also had 2 blocks, 2 clears, 5 recoveries. He was 2 for 2 on take-ons, which led the team. He actually won 4 aerial duels, which is way more than anybody else on the team. Twice the next best person, who was Ima Tuamasi of all people, that was the next best person in aerial duels won. So while things are not gangbustersly great, of course, you're still looking at a striker who needs to have the team connect the ball to him, and Dallas has no one right now that can do that. Leget's trying, but it's not. He's by himself, so that's not really working. So at least like his form is in the correct manner for when they do get guys healthy. So there's some signs of positivity there. And when I did my breakdown, I made him the man of the match. Which I had not done in real time. It wasn't until I looked at the numbers that I did that.
I can't imagine what must be running through Moose's head, making this move here and ending up in this situation with this particular team, and just how bad it is. And, just a young guy, and he's a human too, and he's in a weird place and in a bad situation, and he must be, you just wonder what is, well, we know how often this team has been plagued with guys brought over from a foreign country who all of a sudden decide they want to go back to homeland.
Oh, gosh.
We've seen that before.
That would make it even worse if we were to do that.
So the game ends up 2-1. Dallas is in the mud. They haven't won. The only game they won was against an equally bad team, and they basically won that on a last-second desperate goal and a few Martin Paz saves. I mean, they're literally a sea hair away from being 0 points, completely defeated for the season. Yeah. And that's just the reality of the deal. And I know, Buzz, you want to get into how we got to this point.
Yep.
And I know the first thing's going to be injuries. And you and I have talked about this because I'm of the opinion that it is very easy to let some people off the hook by saying this is a team that has just had the worst run of luck with injuries. But I would say there's an opposite side of that coin, which is any team can be beset by injuries, and at some point it's going to break you. Look at Seattle.
Yeah.
As an example of that, who, by the way, are in fact in worse place than Dallas is somehow in this weird world we live in suddenly. But I feel like the problem with all of this is that almost all of the injuries Dallas is dealing with at this moment were in some way predictable, like high-risk situations. 34-year-old center mid with a lot of miles on him, another center mid with a lengthy injury history, a young star who's been running around with an adductor injury forever. The list goes on and on and on. And it just, I guess if there's an unfortunate part for Dallas, they went into the season with a lot of high risk players. It's just that all of them have blown up in their face.
Yeah, they even went into the season with two guys that were already going to be out for big chunks of the time that are talented players.
I haven't even gotten to that point yet.
Yeah, so again, that goes back to my idea of why I talked about you should have IR'd Alan Velasco even if he was coming back, because it's putting you in this huge hole when all those other things happened. Like if you'd replaced his body with a DP, you'd have one more really good player available that you don't. And if you look at it just the short term, just the guys right now, if you look at by using last year's money, because the PA hasn't leaked the new list yet, but between Velasco, Mendy, Jesus Ferreira, Paxton Pomacolo, and Giovanni Jesus, that's $4.7 million out in a league that has a salary cap of like 2 something. So, no one is ever going to win games with that amount of talent out. And so you're correct that it's a problem of not addressing the injuries that they have and almost in a sense sacrifice half the season because they just were willing to wait. But then also, as you say, betting too much on guys with a series of history of injuries or age, including Jesus and Paxton with the history of injuries. Jesus has always had problems with his core. That's not new. It was so bad, in fact, that you remember when Oscar was here, he and I talked about how all the kids coming to the academy had these core problems. So they had to institute like a core program into the academy because it was so bad with all the kids. He had his own theories about why that was, but it's just modern kids, I guess. But the point is that, with that alone, and you're right, there's a whole bunch of questions that have to be asked with that, including how you're building your roster, how you're maintaining, what you're doing in training, what kind of programs you're running, all kinds of things that can go into that. A lot of them we'll never be able to even answer for because we're not on the internal privy to how their medical system works and their training system works because that's all HIPAA protected and stuff. So it's not a good situation that they've done for themselves. And I want to specifically talk about Jesus some more, if I may.
Please, yeah.
I was trying to look at the big picture of Nico Estevez. And I wanted to set the table first with this idea that 2022 was a really good season. And I looked at 2023 to see the results, to see when they started to turn south. And there's an arbitrary date of May 31st, looking at last year's schedule, where they started losing games. That was right about when Martin Paz got suspended, and then Velasco had his first little injury problem, various things. So before that date, FC Dallas under Nico Estevez, just in regular season, had a record of 21, 12, and 16. That's 79 points in those games. More specifically, that's 1.6 points per game. That would be the sixth best points per game in club history. So for a season and a half, Nico Estevez was a spectacular coach. And then from May 31st of last year and on, Dallas had a record of 5, 11, and 8 for only 23 points and a 0.9 points per game, which is the second worst behind everything but the South Lake season of 2003. So clearly, from essentially the first part of April or the last weekend of May of last year, something has gone horribly, horribly wrong. You know, what guy doesn't go from, not likely go from one of the best they've ever had to one of the worst they've ever had without something happening. So I tried to look and dig and try to figure out what it could be. And other than just generally speaking, that's kind of when the injury started happening. Mm-hmm. And generally speaking, he started tinkering the lineups. The real thing that happened, I think, is that Jesus Ferreira went to the Gold Cup and he hurt his abductor. And since that Gold Cup, Jesus has played in a grand total of 12 games and scored 3 goals since that Gold Cup. Before that Gold Cup, in the first year and a half of Nico's tenure, he scored 27 goals. So that's, over a higher number of games. But essentially, he was twice as good as he is now, and basically is completely ineffective. So he went from scoring a whole boatload of goals for Nico Estevez and a good defensive team to not scoring any goals for Nico Estevez and a relatively speaking until this year, good defensive team. So when you can't score goals, you can't win games. And there's a reason why probably when you look at those kind of numbers, they think we got to get a striker, and they went out and spent $10 million. You can see the payoffs of when it's not working like that. So I don't want to blame Jesus because he's a young guy. He always wants to play through injuries. I don't know enough about his injury specifically to say 100% they should have shut him down and have surgery. I'm inclined to believe that probably was the case. But either way, from the middle of last year, basically what's happened is this team has quit scoring. And most of that is because Jesus quit scoring. So that's the main reason why this team is now terrible, is that no one can score. Because all last year, we talked about no one could score for shit except for Jesus.
Right.
Well, not even Jesus now. So that's where we are. It's brutal. And it's not his fault necessarily. I don't know whose fault it is, but that's the cause of the biggest amount of outage in terms of the team being any good.
Yeah, at that point, it's not a function of who to blame for his particular injury situation. It's who to blame for how they accounted for that or how they planned B for that. And I think my biggest problem with all of this is it just feels like when everything went to crap, well, the decision to leverage this entire season and team on 3 or 4 players who clearly the odds are we're all going to struggle with missed time at various different parts of the season. I just don't think anybody assumed or hoped, at least in the worst case scenario, they'd all be gone at the same time. And that's exactly what's now happened. Well,
you could certainly make the case that Jesus has struggled to get the ball. And we've seen him come back more and more and more and get in those weird positions. If you look to the middle of last year, right? Leggett was not performing. Ariola was not performing. Velasco started getting hurt and eventually blew out his ACL. So all of a sudden, Jesus is not getting the ball. Bernie's coming in, starting to play a little bit and looking pretty good, but Bernie's not a passer. Bernie's not going to pass to Jesus. Bernie's a get it and go kind of guy. And you look at the start of this season, Iramendi, when he came in last year, helped stabilize things, and they tied all those games instead of losing because they were able to at least stabilize defensively and try and get a little bit going offensively. But now he's hurt again, and Epomical's hurt, and all these people that would be able to facilitate for Jesus are not available, and they're also not facilitating for Musa. So you wonder, why is this striker got a 1.1 XG? Well, he's got 1 goal and 1.1 XG. It's not like he's in the wrong positions. You just watch him play. He clearly knows how to play. They're not getting him to the ball in good. the biggest exponent, the biggest part of XG is like you have to have the ball in those positions to be able to score. That's how XG is. It's like if you have the ball here, what's the percentage chance you were going to score? Having the ball is the key. And if you're not having the ball, whether it's Jesus or Musa, again, even if you're healthy or not, that's going to be a problem. So it all relates back to the same things. It's all systemic. It all builds together.
Well, it is about as bad as I can ever recall it being at this particular point of a season. I mean, I think about this a lot at the beginning of baseball seasons when baseball starts and there are a team like the Oakland A's. Everybody knows the Oakland A's are just going to absolutely suck for 100 and whatever, 80, is it 182 or is it 162? What is how long? 162 games. And everybody knows, like, that fan base starts a season going in knowing it's going to be a slog for 162 games, period. The end, there's no way out of it. There's no hope. And and that's why I don't understand baseball as a sport. I don't know how anybody does that. And here we are with this team, and man, I'm just, it has all of the hallmarks of those seasons that we experienced here. Not many of them. There's only been a few of them, Buzz.
Yeah.
But it does feel like the South Lake season to a degree, or name whatever Cotton Bowl pre-South Lake season you want to that went really south. But that's what this feels like.
I think the biggest difference between South Lake and this one is they both have, at least right now, like this big, huge weight hanging over them. The South Lake season, it was the venue. Right. It was the change. It was the philosophy. It was the cost cutting. It was the fact that they weren't being treated like professionals. It was the fact that it was minor league and all that stuff. Just killed it from before the season even started. This one, it's the weight of the injuries. You watch training and they know they're in trouble. They know they're missing all these pieces. And those guys are all still working hard out there when I watch. But, when you have this gloom over things, it can really, play havoc with your ability to try and get out of it. And Dan's Luton, having climbed through 4 tiers of the football, he may not really know what we're talking about until this year, maybe, when Dan's feeling the same thing from his Luton team as he is from this team.
I've seen like 6 relegations with him. I don't know what you're talking about.
Oh, did they?
Oh yeah. Dan's been through Dan's been drugged through way worse shit than this.
I thought it was straight up. I'm sorry, I misunderstood. You did almost get folded. I remember that.
Yeah, we did that 3 times. We did have 3 consecutive relegations. We started the season on minus 30 points. I mean, give us a little bit of credit there.
Oh, so you saw it all the way down and then all the way back up. Wow, what a roller coaster.
Yeah.
Well,
Johnny come lately to give you some credit.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, that's where I was hoping Dan would throw up a really inspirational rah-rah speech of how everybody here shouldn't feel so bad because it could be a lot worse than this, right?
I think I said all that in 2021, right? The club isn't going bust. The owners are going to put money in. They're not going to strip it out and run away with it. They can't do that. They're invested in the league. Yeah, it may be a bit boring. It may be a bit depressing, but ultimately there is going to be a club to support for people. People who, do that whole, if they're not going to play, if they're not going to buy another $10 million striker, they're not worth my time. Great. Sod off. It's all right. Yeah, I mean, that's it. This is a crappy start to the season. It is through 5 games, the joint worst. I think the other one was 2003. That was the South Lake season, right? Where they started draw, loss. Wait, 3 draws and 3 losses in 6 games. So even if they lose at the weekend, hey, it's still not the outright worst start to a season ever. That's all the positivity you get.
I'm fired up now.
No, I think you look at the injuries, that certainly takes away from the attacking side of the ball. It gives the opposition a ball. I can't really think. I'm trying to draw back to other seasons and say, okay, well, are they really facing that many more shots than other times? Because giving up 10 goals in 5 games is just not what FC Dallas has been in the past, nearly a decade. FC Dallas has always been defensive first. It's give up a goal a game. It's not give up 2 goals a game. And I know we'll get into kind of like the breakdown later on of where those goals are coming from and just how, avoidable those are. But the roster construction in general is strange. We kind of all laughed behind tears. Not having a real, Omar Gonzalez, your third centre back. Maybe that works out. Maybe that could be tragic. But something came up in the Discord earlier, and I was on a meeting that I just really didn't want to be on. So I started looking at the roster in 2020, 2022, 2024. So you think 2020, you've got centre back 1, Matt Hedges, 2, Reto Ziegler, 3, Brisson. All right, not amazing, but he still won a Copa Libertadores and started and played the whole thing.
God, I'd kill for those 3 right now.
Right? Tafaro was your centre back 4. Callum Montgomery was 5. All right, Montgomery, massive drop off there. 2022, you've got Hedges, Martinez, you've got Tafaro, Quinones wasn't amazing, Bartlett, it was pretty terrible. Well, this year you've got Tafaro is now up to centre-back 1. You've got Ibiaga, who everyone was like, yeah, if they bring in a centre-back and he's not the starter, he's an adequate third guy. Well, he's an everyday starter right now, and your CB3 is a converted left-back. And then you've got Omar behind him. The drop-off there is horrible, time after time. And then you're also adding the extra, like not now, but you started the season off with a back 5. 2 players that couldn't play the wing-back roles. They don't have a single player. The only one really who seems suited to it is Giovanni Jesus, and obviously he's out until at least May. And then you're still a centre-backs even, in increasing the role.
Yeah, that Dan has actually hit on what is item number 2 in the How Did We Get Here, which is the mismatch between this winter.
I thought you were only doing a 1 point there.
No, there's 4 of them, but we're going to go through them one at a time. And the one you're on now is number 2, and it's the idea that there's a mismatch between the idea that you're going to play a 3-4-3 and the roster that you built, the designers and not a build. And Dan's completely right that there's not enough quality center backs, there's not any wing backs at all. And that disconnect is creating some of the issues we're seeing, in a sense of the coach trying different formations and having these problems with balls into the box and these crosses that are developing. So it's, that's another part of the key reason why Dallas is struggling to win games, is that the personnel doesn't match the system.
Yeah, I feel like Zanata sometimes gets off with a free pass to a certain degree, and I certainly haven't heard from him or seen anybody talk to him or ask him any questions lately. And I don't think unless you guys correct me, I don't think he makes himself available to the media for questions on a regular basis, if at all. And we've talked about this on this podcast endlessly, which is the confusion of exactly what you're talking about, Buzz, is how did we get to a point where a technical director responsible for building a roster created this exact problem in the back, and then the manager decides he wants to play with an additional center back? That part to me makes zero sense, and I'm sure they're both equally at fault in that, but I think that may be the single most glaring problem that needs to be explained to the fans and everybody else how they got here.
Yeah, I would say that I think that, as Steve demonstrated in his piece he wrote today about the space between the center backs, that you play 3 at the back or 5, whatever you want to call it, that tightens up that space and really helps. So I think part of it may be that reaction, that this idea that they have been susceptible the last couple of games to crosses, but even before that, I think that idea was to tighten those gaps, and we go back to the idea of Martinez struggling with guys running at him for pace. That was why even Lucci back in the day tried 3 a little bit to try and tighten those gaps up. So that's a big reason for why you do it.
Well, I understand why Nico did it, but then if you're going to do that, you would think that the technical director is going to help supply him the personnel to do that more effectively.
You would think.
And to Dan's point, the options that Nico has at his disposal that's like a massive drop off in talent from 2020.
Center back right now reminds me of the 6 under Lucci, when it was a slow step down season after season after season, and you just can't do that. You can't You can't regress when everyone else is getting better, and that's why you end up where you are. They're doing to Nico what they did to Lucci, right? Is they're slowly regressing the talent rather than making it better. Making it better is expensive though, so it's not easy to do.
Hence, spending $10 million on a striker, the number 9 we've all been running around begging for.
Well, I'm never going to say that that's not a weird spend because it's so alien to what the Hunts have ever done before. To them to do that. So I have a personal theory about that, but I don't think it's a coincidence that the Benfica youth deal got over the line when at the exact time they were paying $10 million for a striker.
Yeah, I'm sure all that's interconnected. And that's the other thing. And this is a conversation we haven't had on this podcast. Somebody sent me a text after the Austin game and said, can somebody explain to me how this club can go out and spend a near record amount of transfer fee money on a kid that apparently is so not ready to play at this level, he can't even make the 18 on this particular in this particular situation? And I'm speaking of Anis Sali, of course.
Yeah. Now I have gotten a little pushback from inside the club on that $3 million number, but nobody will. Probably because I'm just a blogger. Nobody will give me what the real number is.
You're more than just a blogger to me, Buzz.
So thank you. So, I think that price is probably not accurate, but it's particularly stupid because effectively they've just bought a homegrown. And if you remember, Coach even tapped the brakes pretty hard on like, hey, don't be patient. You're not going to see him have an immediate impact. So literally that's what they've done. And the thing that's ridiculous about it to me, and doesn't matter how good the kid is that there's literally 5 or 6 dudes lined up in the academy that have that exact same profile. So it's like, I don't know why they bothered. So I'm not real thrilled with that conceptually idea of that signing.
Well, I think just real quick, before you get too far, this is where I think people need to pointing the magnifying glass at Zanata, because everybody keeps talking about Nico out, and I'm not saying Nico is blameless here, but if we go back over the last several years of this team having to deal with some realities, the selling of Santos, the signing of this guy, the signing of that guy, and there's certainly been some signings that have been really, really good. The one common factor in all of this isn't the manager at the time, it's Andre Zanata.
Yeah.
And I just don't know if we're spending enough time investigating how good or not good that guy actually is at this role.
Yeah, his rep was for being able to sell players to make money, and he certainly has done that. Before he got here, I don't think the Hunts saw profit, and then he was able to sell guys to make money, which we're going to come back to again in a minute. That Anis Sali was the first finding of their new big trumpeted European scout that I know nothing about. This was his first guy, and obviously I'm not that impressed by it. That idea that they have whatever the price really is, the fact that they've overpaid some bit for what is effectively a homegrown. When you have this academy that does what it does, why bother? So that's weird. The kid does have a little bit of a pace. He's very vertical, but so is Tarek Scott. So what's the point? So I agree with you that I think the fact that they've brought in a TD to work under Andre, and the fact that they've hired this European scout, the fact that they've hired these guys, the scouting here and the overall director, was it maybe 2 years ago now they hired that guy. The fact they've got scouting overseeing South America shows you that I think where Zanata's bread and butter really is. It isn't that stuff. It's not the finding guys or developing guys. It's the selling guys and making money. So, the problem is, of course, that the Hunts just gave him a big extension and a fake title bump, and some more money. So when you do that in January, what are you going to change that in March or April? No, you just change the coach. That's how it is when you're the TD. Right.
Oy vey.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully someday. I mean, look, there's going to come a point in time in this season where they're going to fire Nico. We all know this is coming. And at some point, probably sooner than later, and we're going to get on some Zoom call like we did after they fired Lucci.
Yeah.
And I don't know who. Maybe it's going to be me again that just asks him directly, how much of this is your responsibility?
Yeah. Well, he'll probably say what he did last time, is that some of it was him too. But, again, they just gave him a big raise. So I don't know how much, but I'm sure it's part of it, So, all right, let's move on to item 3 in how we got here. You ready?
Yes, please.
All right. The next one is lack of consistency. And I was looking at Thankfully, FB Ref shows you the lineup for every game. So I went back and looked at the lineups, and it was almost pretty much dead solid lock 4-3-3 until we hit that same mark last year, that end of May into April last year when things started going south. And then it starts to vary and it gets changed up. And you see that again this year too. The coaches vary in the tactics all the time, shape all the time, formation all the time. And I think that's a crazy idea. I think if you're really, really good, you can do that. I think if you're Man City, you can do that. If you've got versatile players and talented players and smart players, maybe even if you're the Crew, you can do that. But if you're a bad team or even a middle table team, I think you have to be very consistent. You have to work really hard to do one thing really well and get to where that thing is very hard to beat and that thing is really good. And then you make other people react to you by being really, really good at one thing. And you don't go on the road and play something different. You just do what you do and you try and be who you are. And he was doing that for the first year and a half, 4-3-3, every time the same. A lot of people didn't like the tactic, this mid to low block kind of stuff that they were doing, this rapid transition they're doing. They're not looking to possess the ball. They do build out of the back, but they don't possess the ball necessarily. And then that all has gone all wishy-washy. And part of it is a reaction to injuries, trying to figure guys out. Part of it is reaction to opposition, but he didn't do a lot of that flip-flopping before things started going south. So that lack of consistency drives me crazy because I'm a big fan of just doing what you do and making people react to it.
Do you remember at the very start of his tenure, he would finish games in almost in the same formation as whatever the opposition was, but it was kind of like as a kill the game strategy. Now he's just kind of, like you say, it's kind of stretching players out a little bit by trying to get them to do too much. You look at Oscar's team, right? It was soak up pressure, counterattack. There was no real plan B, but it was kind of building a team that, like you say, was kind of good at that one role. Right now, it's between two tactics, and for me, the killer on the 3-4-3 wasn't the centre backs; it was actually the wing back. Sorry,
Sure.
Yeah, you think about there is, the one player who probably has that profile is not fit. ACL surgery.
Mm-hmm.
You look at teams that execute that kind of 3-4-3. The wing backs, full pelt, 90 minutes back and forth. Defensively, they don't have to be the strongest, but they have to at least cover, make up numbers, cut out passing lanes. Going forward, lots of crossing, lots of overlapping runs, lots of cutting inside, underlapping runs on the winger. The teams that tend to thrive with it switch play a lot. Dante Seeley in the first 3 games playing that role had 1 cross. They just do not switch play. It's always it's get up, check pass back, go center, keep the ball, lose the ball. Nothing fits that formation.
I agree, Dan, that those two positions are a big problem, but I'll go you one better. I think it's the entire midfield is the problem, because not only are the wingbacks not really capable at this point, whoever's having to play the 2 center midfield positions is a huge hole in this team. Laramendi only played, what was it, a game and a half?
Yeah.
Okay. Paxton played, 20 minutes?
No,
6 minutes?
Yeah,
6 minutes.
Yeah.
And after that, it is some sort of weird combination of the Canadian Fraser, a new young kid they got from South America who looks like he might have something, but he's certainly not MLS Prime ready.
He's growing into it, for sure.
He's growing into it. Or, who's the other one I'm forgetting about?
Legit?
No.
Fraser?
I said Fraser. Delgado, and isn't there a third? Who's the
Siki or Norris?
Yeah, I mean, look, you guys are making my point. And the reason why I can't think of the name is there is no name. It's all just a bunch of throw somebody in there and see what happens kind of situation.
Yeah, I was gonna say, one thing I'm kind of fascinated about with midfield is, I know we're kind of going to get to the idea of like all these goals that come from crosses, and it's something that Steve Davis has mentioned. I didn't read his email today. I haven't got to that yet. But, before we did this, I went back and watched all of the goals. And one thing is really sticking out in my mind. I don't know if they've kind of gone more from that hybrid man mark and zonal to just purely zonal. But everything in and around the penalty spot is just falling perfectly in between backtracking midfielders and a defensive line that's sitting on the edge of the 6-yard box. So an attacking player can, attack the ball. Case in point would be the goal that Fafa Pico scored. No one picked up his run. It's just, there's just that kind of, people talk about that corridor of uncertainty, right, for the goalkeeper on a corner. Well, they're just creating that because you've got a midfield line that's just sat on the 18. You've got the defensive line sat on the 6. And in the middle is just fair game for any attacker because nobody is tracking those runs.
So, Buzz, if this was up to you and if your goal is to establish some sort of tactical consistency, what is it of all the pieces that are left? And what is it? What is the formation that you think ultimately he's going to have to go to find some sort of form?
Well, that's a complicated question. First, I wanted to, when Dan's wingback thing, Dan, you remember how good Rouen was for Montreal? That was a guy put on a clinic as a wingback. He was amazing.
Yeah, and case in point, his pass to Martinez was exactly that kind of. Martinez has the underlapping run. He gets inside of Gonzalez. Rouen just kind of, just coasts the ball inside. Nice and easy. That's what you want your wing back doing.
Yep. To answer your question, Peter, I think we have to talk about the midfield just a little bit more. The way they play the 3-4-3, it's supposed to be this box, right? Where right now you don't have your Armendi and you have Frazier, who's kind of a 6 only, and Legette's trying to do some linking. But you have to remember, too, that Dante Sealy is not a particular passer. In fact, when he had a key pass the other day, it was so remarkable. I was like, oh my gosh. The other side, whether it be Kamungo, whether it be Endele, or whether it be Ima, is not necessarily like a crazy creative, passer. Ariel is not really doing it. Jesus hasn't been playing. Ariel is leading the team in all those categories. Key passes, progressive passes, balls in the final third, progressive dribbles. Ariel's leading him in all those categories, but it's not really doing anything. It's not being effective. He's not finding anybody. Bernie's not really, when he's in there in that role, he's not really an effective passer. Jesus can be, but he's been hurt. So, again, you saw Ansa for 5 minutes play it the correct way and scored. So it's, the problem is that, and you saw the symptoms of that in the Austin game. I'm getting your answer, I swear, is that the Dallas hit like this enormous number of long balls that they normally don't hit. It's like, it was like they had as many long balls as they had medium length balls that they played, because they're basically giving up effectively. Like if they try and do a couple of passes to try and do a build, they're basically just giving up and hoofing it long and hoping they can reset, rather than trying to dribble it, bring it around and reset and try and cycle the ball back and then try and come again. So they're losing some patience there. And because of the fact that they don't have any effective connecting tissue through the middle of the field. And then when I talked to Coach today about the biggest impact of the injuries, he said that was it. It's that ability to connect the back to the front, to do that build out, to do that rapid transition. And the fact that they're losing confidence in themselves, and the resulting is all these long balls they're hitting. So the answer to your question to me would be to go back to what made you comfortable. Go back to what you knew. And that's a 4-3-3. It's a single pivot 4-3-3. You don't have Yaramendi, so stop trying to play a double. Play a single. Put Liam Frazier in there or Delgado in there, whichever one you want, and let him go hit people. And go back to the 4-4-2 with the defensive first mindset. Farfan at left back, and Tuamasi for now, is the only choice available at right back, but is the better defender of all those people at right back anyway. And just tighten that back line up, and with that single 6 in front of it, and go back to the idea of having a double pivot. Put back on real wingers, which you have a couple of. Kamungo was playing really well. Jesus is out anyway. Areola is better at that than anything else. Dante Sealy is better than that than anything else. And you actually have a 9 now. Ansa can wing. Go back to what brought you good results before, and just use that over and over and over again, and try and tighten up the back end and try and get back to that rapid transition that Dallas was really good at in 22 in the first half of last year in 23. So that would be my answer to that. I would be happy with him picking any single formation and just drilling the crap out of it until you get that going. Because right now, and if it is the 3-4-3, they're going to need to they need a center back and a central midfielder, and they need to develop those wing backs. It's going to take all season before they really get it, and I think it's going to be way too late by the time you really get it. So my long-winded answer is go back to the 4-3-3 the way you played it in 2022. Because you don't have these pieces that you thought you were going to have to make it work as a 3-4-3.
All right. Well, I appreciate that. You had a fourth point about how we got here, Buzz.
Yeah.
This might be the most painful of all of them, frankly.
It has. The FC Dallas has betrayed the homegrown system, the thing that made FC Dallas special. For a long time, for about like a decade now, we've talked about how Dallas is always somewhat better, as you said at the start of the show. They've been better than average in the league because everybody can sign players, foreign players, domestic players. Everybody can draft. But Dallas had something most teams didn't have. They had the ability to progress through a homegrown that became a solid part of their first-team roster. So their first-team roster was held up higher by those homegrowns. Paxton Pomykal and Jesus Ferreira are the only two that are still here. The others have all, and don't say not to see, I'll get to that in a second. Since those two guys came through, every player that became an established first-team contributor has been sold. Brian Reynolds, sold. Reggie Cannon, sold. Brandon Sylvania traded, same thing, right? Chris Richards, sold before he became a part of the squad. Edwin Cerrillo, traded. Ricardo Pepi, sold. Tanner Tessman, sold. Justin Shea, sold, right? So that's Antonio Carrera's on loan, but he's not really into the solid contributions yet anyway. And the other people that are not here, there's another 6 or 7 of them. They all just didn't miss. They all became not part of the key system, like Thomas Roberts, for example. So the Dante Seeley is an example. You might say, oh, there's a homegrown contributing. Well, they tried to sell him. They sent him to PSV for 2.5 years.
Nobody wanted him.
And he came back. So now you're using him. So, okay, I'll give you that one sort of, but not really. They tried to get rid of him. They tried to make money off of him. So the point is that the thing that for a long time kept you in the top half of the league is gone. It's done. Now, will there be some more? Will Nolan get there? Will Tarek Scott get there? Will the next wave of homegrowns get there? Probably. But if they sell them off again, you'll have cut the heart out of this team, the thing that made it above average all the time. Now, we always lamented they never spent the little extra money on top to make them push it over the top. Well, they finally went out and spent $10 million on a striker. At the same time, they've gutted the roster by selling all these pieces off.
Yeah.
So that's the painful one. You're right. That's the one that makes me the maddest. And that, again, is not a thing. With the blessings of the Hunts, obviously they wanted to make some money, but here we are.
That was always the model, but really the most painful part of it is that the two homegrown players because somebody will go, but wait, what about Jesus and Paxton?
Oh yeah, sure.
Okay. Well, they're also paying each of those guys $1 million+ dollars.
Yeah.
So it's not like you're saving money on those two.
Sure.
And one of which, the only reason, and here's the other part, one of which, make no mistake, Paxton wouldn't be here if he had stayed healthy. He would have been sold for a lot of money. And Jesus wouldn't be here if he just wasn't this weird tweener and it would establish himself as really premier and top class at one particular position that somebody wanted him for.
If he hadn't hurt his abductor at the Gold Cup and he'd have finished the back half of last year and had back-to-back 18-goal seasons, he wouldn't be here.
Sure.
Well,
right.
Same but he also had his injury troubles, in his first couple of years as a homegrown too. Yeah. It's not like he's had a clean bill of health up until last year.
And those two guys are great examples, and they're 99s. And we're now up to class. The 2006s have been signed. We're up to 2007, so we're approaching a decade, and you have 2 players left that are adding value and being a consistent contributor in our team. So people joke about, oh, this is the Ajax of no. Ajax keeps a bunch of dudes. They don't get sell them all. You can't sell them all and then still be able to compete. So that's item number 4 on how we got here.
Ajax also sell guys, when they've taken them to a Champions League semi-final. Not
fair.
Just when, hey, we got to the playoffs.
Yeah.
I do wonder how much actually comes from the Hunts in a way. Obviously, this is speculation, right? We know Nico's deal is coming up. What the those end of year expectations and everything, because Dan Hunt talked a lot over the preseason or the off season. Hey, we're there defensively. We just need goals. So then they don't focus on rebuilding the defense that they were losing pieces from, but they go out and spend nearly $10 million on a striker. And then, Enes Sali as an attacking player too. It just seems like such a massive imbalance, and something that really, to then go for a formation that, like you say, isn't defensive first. You lose your defensive first left back, or your right backs, either or. It seems so uncharacteristic. And we've talked about Nico's suitability to the DNA of the club, but did the ownership of the club decide that DNA needed to be slightly different?
Well, I still push back on the idea that the defense was fine. When you remember when Zanaya told me they were good at center back, and I said specifically, I think if you want to quote me, said that I took that as I was like, you guys don't understand how to build teams in this league then, because to me you were clearly missing a center back when you were playing 4, let alone when you went to 3. So like
statistically, the defense was there, but you knew you were losing Hedges, you were losing Martinez. You knew you had a right back that was going to be out for a year. Like, there was a lot of work to do there.
But I also think that fails to appreciate the one good thing that they did is they went out and got Illarramendi, because Illarramendi was a key component to the defense solidifying last year through that weird run where they were tying games and not losing games. Because he is so...
The one game they've won this season where he ran, 8 kilometers?
Yeah, exactly. So I think I can see a world, Buzz, where this team talked themselves into this idea that because of Illarramendi, they could patch up a lot of things and get away with some things by not signing a big name or big dollar center back. But we are going to make everybody excited by finally signing the big dollar striker. And we have all these pieces. We just have to hope everybody stays healthy. Because on paper, if everybody's still healthy, this team is a solid kind of better than average MLS team.
100%. Yeah. The some of the minor things that are contributing to the bad play right now, would be overcome by, as they have been for multiple years, by the relative level of talent you have. We all picked them to be in the playoffs, in the middle part of the playoff pack, but again, we also talked about the idea when they signed him at 34 that recovery time was going to be slow. And we're seeing that. And we've all talked all the time about Paxton can't play 34 games. Right. And we talked about how bad it was, in my opinion, that they weren't replacing Velasco. They were just going to eat a DP salary for a season, and so it's like, and Ferreira with his always having his core problems. So like you hit the nail on the head with they had this strategy that was going to work if they all stayed healthy. Man, nobody stays healthy in this league. Your strategy has to be what happens when we don't stay healthy. Yeah, I think.
Well, you're right. And at the end of the day, somebody asked me the other day if Nico's the problem, and I don't know the answer to that because, the reality is the best run this team has had under him was largely powered by the aligning of the stars in terms of a lot of players being in really good form. And that included
very healthy.
And being healthy.
Yeah.
Areola, Leggett, Jesus, Paxton, et cetera, and that really powered that season for him. And when things, to your point, like people started becoming, it's the season. It started when the Leggett thing happened, and he went, he went to the sack, and Areola showed up not in the best of form because he was all bent about the World Cup, and all of that stuff started, and then Jesus got hurt, and it's just been downhill from there. So I don't know if Nico is a good coach or not. I just don't know.
I think that I think you can look at 22 in the first half of 23 and say that when he has his pieces, I think he's a good coach. The question is, when things went south, did he overthink it and overreact to it? I think you can make that case. We've talked about all the weird formations. We talked about trying to put his team in a system because he thinks that system can help them beat people, rather than like I am adamant about in Major League Soccer, which is, look, when you're getting ready for the season, you have to look at what you have and say, what's the best thing I can do to get these guys on the field? The problem is that I think he thinks he's doing that by doing all these different things and different tactics and alterations and fluid formations and game shifting in and out of shapes. I think he really thinks that he is doing the thing that's going to best make his team compete. The question then becomes, is that overly complicated for Major League Soccer? This isn't Man City. This isn't Liverpool. We don't have guys that are worth $100 million, but we have guys here that are worth $5 million at most, or 10 if you get lucky with Jesus. They don't have the brainiac soccer ability to play these super. One or two of them do. Irmani certainly does, but you see how above the game he is compared to everybody else. Paxton maybe could do it, which is why that one game we saw him play that weird 6 to like right backy 8 kind of combo thing that Nico got from Berhalter. Paxton did that one game. So, it depends on how you like your tea, whether he's the problem or not. I think there are systemic problems between him and Zanata and the DNA of the club and the expenditures and the places they did and didn't add players. There's a whole disconnect happening that's making the injuries even worse. And let alone like what's going on internally. I'm not going to say causing these injuries, but sometimes when you have an extended run of injuries, like of all various different kinds, sometimes there's a problem we don't understand and don't know about. And you can't even identify it until some guy gets fired and Tracy Coleman comes in and all of a sudden they all go away. So.
Right. I don't know if everybody gets the Tracy Coleman reference.
Yeah, he was a trainer that left here a couple of years ago, but there was a time where they were having a whole bunch of injury problems and they changed trainers and he came in and they all went away. Within like 2 months, they were all gone.
Right.
We miss you, Tracy.
Yeah.
and Profe Bazan too. He was Oscar's kind of solution to a lot of injury problems.
Huge. Yeah. Phenomenal. You cannot undersell him. But, and I'm not saying that there's a problem. I'm not involved enough in that stuff because I'm an outsider to tell you if there's a problem or not. I notice when you have a lot of injuries like this, sometimes there's a systemic problem in what they're doing. I can't help but think, for example, remember when Nico came in, there was this idea that training was too lax and they were going to push the pace in training and they were going to go drill to drill to drill to drill and they were going to tighten up and make it shorter. Well, man, it's freaking hot here. You know what I mean? It's like, maybe that doesn't work here. That's the one thing I can think of that he does very different than anybody else. Maybe that's a contributing factor. Although it wasn't in season 1, but it was in season 2. Maybe, I don't know.
Just wonder what the scientific approach is. Like when the Bazan, well, Hosema was already here, but when Fabian Bazan came in, they started talking about, measuring player strides, really using all those analytics that they get from those GPS trackers and the different cameras that they have in training. Having, modifying reps for different players, pulling players out of different parts of sessions, but letting them continue elsewhere. It doesn't seem like something like that's happening. Granted, I haven't been to, the last time I went to practice was, it wasn't 2024, with the schedules, unfortunately, but I haven't seen that the last few years.
They do a little bit of that, not as much, but I have had seen them yell at guys to like, hey, get off the damn field, stop taking PKs or stop working on crosses. You've reached your limit load. They do have some of that.
Yeah, this was kind of like, it's this many meters he has to, it's this many yards he has to run. It's this many minutes in this particular drill. This drill's a bit too heavy on this particular muscle load. It seems more like, okay, just pull him out of the session entirely now. He's going to go run laps on the side.
No, that's exactly right. Yeah.
Which is more like that kind of Shellis Heinemann approach.
Mm.
Oh, Shellis.
Yeah, I don't think it's like that quite. But yeah.
I just mean in general, it's kind of like you're in or you're out. Not like, let's scale back here. Let's protect this muscle group. Something that, doing shuttle runs on a guy that's got a dodgy hamstring, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Well, that was not a lot of fun to talk about. We do have to plug on because there is a game this weekend at St. Louis. It feels like if everybody's bummed out losing to Austin, that was against a bad team. Now Dallas has got to go play a team that's going to impose its will on them for 90 minutes. And you went to training today. You talked to Nico. And by the way, Buzz, I really wanted to call in sick on this podcast after I saw your podcast teaser video, and you told everybody in advance the update on the injury situation, which is obvious.
Yeah. Well, Yarmindi and Jesus are no go. The one that you may be surprised to hear is that Peter Musa picked up a little tightness in some part of his body in training on Tuesday. So they had an MRI, and he's clear. He's 100% fine. So today he was doing like cones and flags instead. But coach says, as he always does, optimistically, that he's fine and will be available this weekend. So Pettermoose is fine, coach says. Granted, you have to wait till see what happens on the weekend. But so he should be good. That was the one that was the first team player that had a knock and came through it. That was him. But no Yaramendi and no Jesus, both theoretically next week. So
all right, so pause on that for a second.
Martin, pause?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
I'm just going to state for the record, we are now officially at a point, I feel like, with both both Jesus, but specifically and more concerningly, Alaramendi, that we're at this point where it's like this injury thing is dragged out 1 week, 2 weeks. Here we are, week 3, and he's still not back. And I just am going to put everybody on officially an injury, big-time injury status warning, which is, don't be surprised if we get a visit or a press release at the end of a week from now and somebody goes, oh, yeah, Alaramendi, he's out for 3 months or whatever it is because it's worse than we thought it was.
Yeah, I saw a report today that he tore his abductor in 2020. So this is a problem area for him.
So it is an adductor injury on him.
Yeah, that's what it is. The same thing as Jesus. Or what Jesus was. Now Jesus is a hamstring, but again, hip connected to leg.
But my point is that this has been going on with these guys now for longer than they've been kind of peddling it, and I feel like they're soft playing this, and we all should be mentally prepared. We can all hope for the best, but we should be mentally prepared for the reality that we may not see one or both of these guys for some time.
Yeah, well, we've always said that one of the biggest signs of the age, 34, is that you recover slower. So it's not a surprise that it keeps being longer than they said it was going to be. And that's what I joked about Nico being ever the optimist. He's always one more week, so take 1 more week on those two guys with a grain of salt.
Okay.
One thing to keep in mind with Iara's injury is that half game, he had the knock coming into it, and that's why they had him on a minutes restriction for 45 minutes. So obviously he made that worse.
Yeah, and that's why I told you it was bad that Yaramendi ran the most miles in that first game. And everyone was like, that's awesome. I was like, no, it's not. He's 34. That sucks. It's not good. So anyway, more training report. So obviously, Nico at this point, it will not surprise anyone to hear, is trying to keep his guys motivated. So there was a lot of he was putting a lot of energy out today. Nico was trying to get everybody up and attacking and keeping the pace up and keeping them motivated and fighting. So I think that's probably pretty good. That's probably I like that vibe.
I don't feel like that's Nico's forte.
It's not his usual forte. He's not really that kind of guy usually.
He's not a rah-rah dude.
Yeah, he did much more vocalization and much more direct running of training today than he ever has done that I've seen before. I think listen, they all know exactly what's going on, and he knows exactly what's going on. They know they're going to have to have their hands full for the next several weeks until they get some of these bodies back, if they do. So it's going to be a fight and a claw, and hopefully they don't give up. Because if they give up, it's going to be South Lake-like. If they don't give up, even if they change the coach, it's not necessarily going to rebound. Then we don't necessarily it's hard to get a coach change bump if you don't have any players. So, I don't know that would help anything. Outside of that, though, they are playing St. Louis this weekend, who they smoked here, if you remember, last year, and they were doing pretty well up there until they got a red card in that game. St. Louis plays very narrow and very direct. When they get the ball, they don't mess around with it. They go in a hurry at you vertically, and they try and smash it up front to their guys and come at you over the top or in hitting a gap. So there's not going to be this lollygagging the ball around by St. Louis. I think with the struggles between that, as Steve Davis so eloquently put in his piece, and we've talked about here to death, the spaces between the center backs, I think they'll go back to a 3 at the back to try and tighten those gaps, particularly against a team like St. Louis that wants to run at you. And because they play so narrow, the wing backs should have plenty of hay up and down the outside. The question is going to be, can you get back to your ways of rapid transition? Because St. Louis won't possess you too much. They will turn it over. And if you can get at them, and that's what Dallas was really effective against them last year. So if you can get back to that, you'll have a chance. That's the idea. That's what you're probably going to go for. So along those lines, it sounds like Musa's ready to go. I think you'll see Paz, of course. I think Paul Areola will be your right wing back because of that idea of how much space is going to be out wide. And then it'll be Ibiaga, Nkosi, and Sam, of course. Left wing back was interesting. Like I watched Marco Farfan play as much as Dante Sealy did at wing back today. So that might be a coin flip for this one. The idea that you might be able to do things out wide would make me lean towards Dante Sealy, but you also don't want to get, if you want to occasionally tighten it up and have it turn into a 4 because Paul on the other side won't be able to do that, you might lean towards Farfan. So you can pick whichever one you like there. I don't think you have any choice but to go with like because of the way they're going to come up the gut, I think you might be looking at a Liam Frazier Delgado double pivot in front of that back three. And that would let Leggett play higher. So you might, because Ariel will be in the back, you put Leggett up in that underneath role with Musa. And because Ansah had a pretty decent game, I think there's a chance you might see Ansah again as one of those two guys with Leggett rather than, say, Bernie or I don't even know who else it would be at this point because Paul's going to be, I think, in the back. So that's what I think you'll see. And I think that's how they'll attempt to go at them. And hopefully we'll see a positive result and not get steamrolled.
It's going to be a bloodbath.
It could be, but
it's going to be interesting because St. Louis are crap this year.
Yeah, they're not playing really well either. But they're better than Dallas. But
their only wins come against a 10-man New York City. They've had a couple of draws, but
City's been reeling too.
Yeah, it's 2 weeks of really awful matchups. Yay, MLS season pass subscriptions.
Well, and there's no Messi to watch because he's out again this weekend.
That's true.
He doesn't play for FC Dallas. That's fine.
Well, speaking of underselling an injury, I'm surprised his leg isn't broken from that tackle that started this whole thing, and I'm quietly wondering if that particular tackle and the result of that wasn't worse than they're letting on, just because it's Messi.
Yeah, they're not going to admit that he's out long term if he is, I'm sure.
Okay, so that is Saturday at St. Louis, and yes, as Buzz has reported to everybody in the Discord, they will once again wear the glorious white kits. Yep. They've worn the Afterburner jersey. The shirt that we don't like is Dallas shirts. I guess the upside is they've only worn it once all season.
They listen to us.
And they're undefeated in it.
Yeah.
100% record.
That's right.
Yeah. Now, if we get to the Seattle game and they in Seattle wears the red and Dallas comes in here and wears white at home, then it'll be like, okay, what the hell is going on? But this one sort of makes sense because St. Louis wants to wear their pink or whatever color that is.
All right. Well, everybody keep fingers crossed, bedtime prayers, whatever, hopefully for some sort of result. That would be great.
Yeah.
Buzz, to finish thing up, we had another glorious Dallas Cup.
So good
to enjoy.
Yeah,
good stuff.
It was really good. By the way, first off, shout out to the ECNL teams that won 4 Dallas Cup titles, which now has FC Dallas is now at 15 titles, which is 2 behind the all-time champion T-Ris at 17, and they're closing the gap. So on the boys' side, the ECNL Red won the 16s, which is amazing because the Academy 16s finished third in their group and crapped out in the group play, and ECNL Red, which theoretically is the second tier, won the thing. That's amazing. Those guys played great, amazing. At 18s on the boys' side, the ECNL White won the championship, which is, once again, super awesome. They played really well and won the 18s, which is admittedly not a great group normally, but those guys played really well as a group and won that. On the girls' side, the U17s were won by the absolutely insane 07 group, which have now won 3 straight Dallas Cups.
Yeah.
And beat a team 20-0, and they didn't get scored on the whole time, and they had like 46 goals for or something. That team is insane good. Your friend Wayne's daughter's on that team.
Yeah, Holly, yeah.
And then the 09
She's
girls,
an A&M commit, Buzz.
Yeah,
she's an Aggie.
Yeah. They've got at least 4 national team players on that team, 3 U.S. and 1 Mexican, just a phenomenal team. And then the 09 girls, which is the under 15, also won. On the academy side, not so great. Lots of teams crapping out. The one in the GA Cup, the 15s crapped out, but the U17s have now progressed through, which is a really talented team that I'm excited about. But back to the Dallas Cup, I want to give a shout out to the U19 team. I've talked a little bit about how relatively gutted that team is. There's multiple homegrowns gone. There's multiple big-time signings that have gone to other clubs. Eystone is not there. Pickering's not there with Memphis. Corcoran's not there with Birmingham. Nolan Norris is with FC Dallas. Tariq Scott's with FC Dallas. I mean, there's a lot of talent gone from that team. It was two other guys that have left the academy just on their own violation that are not in that team. So they're coached by Chuy Vera, who is a phenomenal coach, and every kid in that team basically had the tournament of their life. And Chewy coached his tail off and ran some phenomenal systems at people that confused the crap out of the other teams. And they had an amazing run to the Dallas Cup Super Group Final, beating Botafogo on the way and playing Sao Paulo, who at every single position has a $1 million prospect to the FC Dallas's group of college kids. And they played right with them and had them beat for a bit and then ended up not being able to hold on. But it was an absolutely phenomenal performance by those kids, all of whom played their best I've ever seen them play. And Chewy's an amazing coach that I think people should pay more attention to in the academy. And he's the former, head of scouting here under Lucci. He was an assistant coach and head of scouting, and he wanted to get back into more direct coaching. So that's why he's running the 19s now. He's from Venezuela, I believe, unless I'm mistaken. So
he was a top level coach in Venezuela.
Yeah, won a couple titles, and got to a couple championships,
won national team player.
Cups, played for the national team. Phenomenal coach, and they had a great run. So credit to them, and super amazing for them to get. I mean, I think it's only the second Dallas team to even get to a Super Group final, and they had a shot to be the third American team ever. It's like a once a decade achievement so far, and they had a shot at it. It was great to see. It renewed my faith in humanity.
Well, Dallas Cup is certainly back up and running at full power. It was a great tournament again this year. Post-pandemic, they've really done good work at getting themselves back in full standing, and good times as always, for sure. So congratulations to all those teams. I do have a question, though, and I'm sure there's a reasonable reason for this, and I don't ask this question to be critical. I am just genuinely curious about it. Why doesn't the club's social media account promote those results? Like, why isn't on the FC Dallas Twitter account and on the other social media channels, why aren't they highlighting the successes of those teams?
Well, they have specific social media accounts for youth and for the academy. And Garrett did do some, lots of tweeting like I do, and wrote some articles, some basic articles about some results. And the main account, tweets them out once, basically. So I'm going to assume, I'm not speaking for them, I'm going to assume that they don't go all hard in on it because the numbers are just not there. It just doesn't generate traffic.
Yeah, the only thing that I saw was them, like, they retweeted something Garrett posted.
Yeah.
That doesn't feel like it's sufficient enough. I don't know. I would feel like for a club that has built its reputation on its academy and its youth structure, they would want to celebrate those results both on the boys and girls side in an official manner. And I just don't see it. And I'm again, you may be right, Buzz. Maybe it just doesn't track traffic and that's all they care about, which I guess in that would be a disappointing answer too.
Yeah.
I was really surprised for all the success they had in the tournament this year, for none of the social media to directly and on the official club channel talk about that. I don't know why they don't do that.
There's also a possibility that MLS has had a little quiet, hey guys, Generation Adidas Cup, we schedule it on the same week. Please don't overshadow it.
Yeah, they do make a bigger deal out of the GA Cup. I will admit
but I didn't see them tweet anything about that either.
Well, it's because they just started. Or
lost the first game.
Well, they haven't so far. How about that?
Well, they've shared that, more than they have the Dallas Cup. I without being privy to the exact reason, I do know that, like, when I've talked to them about, hey, how can we do this? How can we do that? The answer is almost always internet analytics. They just look at the numbers of the traffic. There's been guys that have been, they're like, man, I would love to do that story, but it just doesn't do anything for us. So it's like,
If you think about like GA Cup, they've got all the broadcasts, they've got, the league's cutting clips.
Yeah.
I tried to watch some Dallas Cup games. I couldn't figure out who the actual provider was because there were 3 different companies who I'd never heard of talking about it. So other than like the U19 final, it seemed like it was really inaccessible compared to the days where it was like always on whether it was on Spectrum Sport or Fox Sports Southwest or on YouTube, which made life easy.
Yeah, I'm sure. It's not my business, and I'm sure there's a reasonable answer for it. I'm just somewhat surprised for a club with this history, in terms of how its core is its youth structure, that they don't pay more homage or celebration of that. It's like patting yourself on the back. It's like it just seems so obvious and easy to do. But again, maybe there's a reason why they don't do it that I don't understand. So
I will refer you to the first half of the show where we talked about it and gutting the homegrown system.
Yeah, I know.
I just think some of it's like how far away those kids would be from helping the first team. I assume it's going to come down in the end to the metrics. It's just the audience isn't there. There's no payoff for it. It doesn't get traction. It doesn't get clicks. Doesn't drive tickets.
Yeah, that seems really self-defeating in my mind, but whatever. Okay, well, there you go. Dallas Cup was great. FC Dallas not so great in terms of the MLS team, and we'll see where the rest of the season goes from here. But everybody just keep your chin up and know there's always next season, and we'll figure out a way to get through this one in the meantime, right?
Yep.
Okay, maybe some young player will, show up. Maybe Solly will turn out to be a baller, and he'll come up and they'll let him play a game, and he'll ball out, against Houston one night or something. Who knows? And we'll all celebrate that.
We can hope.
All right. Well, anything else?
For OSC, got to the second round of the Open Cup. Unfortunately, fell to the Lubbock
Matadors.
And that was Open Cup, you said?
Yeah. And if you were thinking, FC Dallas is crap right now, I will load my MLS fantasy team with St. Louis City players. Edward Loven is out with a hamstring injury, so don't pick him.
Yeah.
Okay.
Third Degree, the podcast, has been brought to you by Soccer90.com. They're your source for all the FC Dallas U.S. national team and international club gear you can want. They got everything over there. Jersey, scarves, tees, pre-match tops, jackets. This stuff is amazing. As a Third Degree listener, you get 20% off in-store or online. In-store, just mention the code Third Degree at checkout. You get the same discount you get online. Soccer90.com, code Third Degree. Some exclusions may apply. Podcast was also brought to you by the Lindstrom Law Firm for wills, trust, probate, and business law. Call 469-515-2559. That's 469-515-2559. Or visit lindstromlawfirm.com for a free consultation.
All right. Well, awkward dismount. Thank you, Dan. I appreciate your time tonight, sir. I know you're a very busy human being.
I appreciate being awkward as always.
Yes, always. And Buzz, doing the Lord's duty, sir.
Thanks. The Dallas Cup was always a blast. It was busy, but it was a blast. It was fun.
All right. Well, here we go into another weekend. And thank you, FC Dallas Curious fan, for sticking through thick and thin. We will speak to you next week, one way or the other, in another episode of Third Degree, the podcast.
It'll get better. Probably.
Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast. Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast. Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast. Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast.